There you go.
Hello,
Hello.
I'm Michael.
I'm Heidi, and we're the Eppersons at renewedlifementoring.com.
I'm talking in stereo today.
Yes. We're going to talk specifically today about procrastination.
Can we do that later? Anyway.
Please, I don't need to tag Michael in this because he's right here. I don't like those notifications. Oh gosh. Anyway, a short little prayer. Lord, I pray that you would open our eyes to the truth of procrastination. What are your thoughts about when we put off things that you've called us to do now or today? I pray that we would embrace your thoughts and think your thoughts after you, and that you'd give us solutions to procrastination. And we ask it in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Yay. Well, what do you think about procrastination? Why does procrastination have to do with consciously creative? Why don't you do the talking? I'll nod and smile.
Well, I think that a lot of times when you're procrastinating, you're choosing not to live your best life now. I'm just joking.
You didn't just do that. Okay, go ahead.
But I think sometimes we allow fears and different things to kind of stand in our way of actually doing something now. When I owned my bakery, I used to say, don't put off tomorrow what you can do today because you might have more to do tomorrow. That isn't really what I said, but it's the context of what I said. Because you might have more to do tomorrow, and you might actually end up hurting, causing more work for yourself tomorrow that you don't need to do. But anyway, with that in mind, though, I know in my own life, there's lots of times that I would say, I'm going to do that later, I'm going to do that later, I'm going to do that later. And when in the end, what I was really trying to do was to not have to face the pain of whatever I have to do, or the fear of what I might have to do, like book work is a good example. Why would I want to sit here and do all this book work when I can go play a game and veg out doing something else?
Yeah. Yeah, Mike, we also mentioned sometimes it's fear of, like, when I don't want to do something that might be a little new to me, or something I have a learning curve on, the reason I might procrastinate it and not do it right now.
Right. Yeah, and along those lines too, I know, when I was kind of doing work on things like procrastination, that the one thing I had to remind myself of was my victories, the times when, even if I procrastinated, when I went and did it, I actually was successful in doing it. And so, I think sometimes procrastination is because of the failure to
Fear. Fear.
The fear of failure. Thank you. But I know when I tell myself about the victories and the times when I actually did step out and I did it anyway, even though it was kind of stressful for me or whatever, that I was successful in doing it. And so now that I'm facing something new, why am I choosing to not do it now? So.
Yeah, and for me, I know one of the reasons why I tend to procrastinate might be because I want to find a way to justify what is really at the heart disobedience. It's God has called me to do X or to do Y in any given day, and if I say I'm going to do that later, I'm basically putting off what He's called me to do today, and I can feel like I'm not disobeying. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why I might procrastinate, is I really don't want to do that, even though I know He's called me to obey Him in it. And like packing to move might be a really good example. I have to get things done. So if I choose to sit down and do something fluffy, like maybe it's playing a game, then I have to really look at, what am I being obedient? If I'm saying I'll do it later, is that obedience? And what does God have to say about that? Is God saying, child, I want you to do it now. It will relieve the stress that you're feeling. It will relieve the panic that's setting in, even as you're sitting there playing your game on your computer or whatever. And so we might want to look at that too and see, am I really trying to find a way to just not do what God's called me to do? What else do you have to say about procrastination?
Well, I think
You said a lot of good things.
I think part of it was something that we talked about a little earlier, not in this broadcast, obviously, was the fear to risk. Mm-hmm. And risk obviously can be, well, it's not obvious, I guess. Risk can be interpreted in different ways. You know, there's the emotional risk, like you're starting a new job, or just like us, I'm taking a job and we're basically selling or putting everything we own in storage and moving to mostly deserted island called Catalina. But anyway.
The part of the island we're going to is deserted.
But there's also other risks, including spiritual risk, as in, like Heidi mentioned, it's like, are you willing to do what God has asked you to do? That in itself is a risk, I think. Mm-hmm. But I think the hardest one for all of us, well, at least for me, is definitely the emotional risk. I know when I was a kid, and I know other people have talked about it as well, that, my parents labeled me as an emotional child, or a sensitive child, more like. And so why am I going to continue to put myself out there if they're going to tell me to get over it, or quit your crying, or
buck up, buttercup.
Yeah, exactly. Suck it up, buttercup.
Oh, that's right. Suck it up, buttercup.
But and so I think we learn it at a young age, that putting ourselves out there and letting people know how we feel is actually not a good thing.
Right.
And so that causes those walls of isolation and our need to want to withdraw or to numb ourselves out with other things. I feel bad, and so I'm going to go on a hike or watch a movie or mm-hmm. whatever, instead of doing those things that are necessary for me to do now.
Yeah, we want to encourage ourselves and you guys to, if you have something that you want to do instead of something else, who are you bringing to that decision? Is it the godly redeemed adult who's making that decision? Are you choosing to experience the hike in this case, or are you choosing to escape from what waits for you at home or at the office? And so these are the kinds of things that kind of, when we're not intentional about looking at that and answering those questions and making decisions accordingly, we are actually doing the opposite of consciously created living. It takes work at first to be intentional, that's true, but there's always something pulling on us if we're not intentional to escape from what is our default. Chances are we're going to be taken captive by runaway thoughts, patterns of our past that we want to be free from. And so we want to stop and look at, okay, I planned to go on this hike today, and so I'm going to choose intentionally. The redeemed child of God is going to say, I have time for this in my schedule. It's going to be recreation, which is the word recreate is in there. And I'm going to experience it rather than escape from something else. And so procrastination and risk and being intentional, all of these things kind of overlap. And it's really helpful if you catch yourself in a place where you're putting off something again and again. Ask yourself, what is that about? And a really great tool to help you remember that there have been victories for you, if it is a fear of failure, might be a victory list. And in Fresh Wind, Fresh Desire, we talk about this quite a bit, but a victory list can be it can be anywhere. It can be on your phone that you keep it. It can be a journal. It can be, well, anywhere, but preferably at some place where you can look at it. And it's when you experience even the slightest little movement forward in a difficult area, or you chose not to say something you really wanted to say. That's
or taking the risk to share something you might have not wanted to.
Right.
Sharing before.
Exactly. Yeah. You can jot that down. Or when you try an activity and even just try. I remember when I trained for the San Francisco Marathon. For me, finishing the marathon wasn't as big a deal as, for me, crossing the starting line, because I was so afraid of failure that I often would not even start things. And so that was a huge victory for me, is to just even go across the starting line. I mean, I did it with tears and everything. It was pretty eventful, the starting line. But if we keep a list of victories we've experienced, of things that we've learned to do, that we've tried to do, that we're out of our comfort zones, and then look at that at any given moment, okay, hey, I've been successful. The Lord has enabled me. In my weakness, He is made strong. The scriptures say so, and I've experienced that. Then we're not as likely to procrastinate as if we're just looking at it going, oh my goodness, I don't want it. That's huge. I don't want to do that. It takes way too much. I'll be honest with you. It's not about procrastination necessarily, but it is about fear of risk. This move that we're making to a very deserted part of Catalina Island is terrifying for me in many ways, mostly because I am a person who values emotional connection with my peeps, face to face. Yeah, community. And so I'm going to have to learn a lot of new coping skills, and I'm afraid to. I'm afraid of even trying. But if I don't try, I mean, now I'm going to talk truth to myself. What are my options here? Okay, there aren't a whole lot of options. I'm either going to try to learn and generate lists of tools that I can use to help me in those moments when I miss my peeps face to face. What will I try? Because if I don't intentionally strategize, then I'm choosing failure. My default is not a happy place to go. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I was also thinking, like, especially in our circumstance or where we're moving to, based on the information we have, it seems one way, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what we're going to find when we get there.
That's true.
But one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking was, there's people who are afraid to succeed.
Oh, that's so true.
Wonder if you didn't want to start something new, or wonder if you didn't want to, I don't know, put yourself out there in some way, whether that's in a job or something else. Because what would the people around you say if you actually were successful about it? You know, I mean, it's like, wonder if you were able to break that addiction. Wonder if you were able to have a healthy relationship with food, or even with people in a place as crazy as a church, which was my issue for a long time. But, wonder if you were, you know, what are people in your life and around you, including your parents, or, you know, even Jesus couldn't do things in his own town, right? I mean, because they saw him as the carpenter. Mm-hmm. They didn't see him as the Son of God, and obviously we're not the Son of God. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think that we're afraid of other people's opinions of us. And that's, I think, another reason why we might procrastinate as well.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money there. I know that it sometimes feels like when we do have those successes, we don't just put them in a list, a victory list. We don't celebrate them as being something from the Lord. We often hide them because we're afraid of what people might think of us too. They might think we're arrogant or prideful or whatever it might be. And so we don't enjoy the victory that God has given us. We want to proclaim his victory wherever it comes, and then remind ourselves of that intentionally so we don't put off the things he's calling us to do right now. That we know that, God, if you have called me to this, you will equip me for this. It may not come until the very moment when I need it. Mm-hmm. Like right now, I don't feel equipped to manage on an island with 20 people I'm working and living with in the winter months when it's raining. No, I don't feel equipped. But you know what? Right now, I don't need that equipping. Right now, in this moment, I don't need to feel that confidence. And so I can step forward in faith that the moment I need it, he will do it. It's kind of like when he called the Levites to step into the Jordan at flood stage. The Israelites had to follow the Levites, but the first Levite, the first guy who had to step foot in that Jordan River at flood stage, it wasn't going to part until he stepped his foot in it. And I feel like that's kind of what God does with us. We have to believe in faith that, okay, procrastination is disobedience. If God is calling me to it, he means now, unless he's told us otherwise, of course. And so I'm going to step my foot in and trust him to part the waters and make the way clear. He's going to equip me if he's calling me to do this now.
I was thinking about the whole armor of God thing, which I put in that last blog that I wrote, where he asks us to do all these things, including, put on the belt of truth and all of those things. But the last thing he tells us is that we are supposed to stand. When we've done all that we can do, we are supposed to stand. And that is making a conscious choice. That's making the decision to prepare ourselves and to be prepared, and then allow God to move in our life and to help us overcome those things of our past and things that we're allowing to hold us back and defeat us.
Right.
He calls us into victory. He doesn't call us into defeat.
Yeah, he's actually won the victory, and we just need to walk it out. As you were talking about that, Michael, too, I was thinking of how many of us in our lifetimes have been shot down by people who we thought cared about us, who may have known us really well even, and we take that thought with us into what's ahead and allow it to kind of diminish or yank out from under us the carpet that God is rolling out for us to step on in faith. It's like we elevate what they have to say about us or had to say about us above God's call. And so that's another thing that may cause me to either run and not be obedient at all, or procrastinate and not be obedient, to actually deny that God would call me to do that, because after all, could all these people be wrong? Or, whether it's people who told me I would never amount to something, or people who told me I am bossy and how could I possibly serve if I'm bossy, that sort of thing, or whatever. I can't think of all the different possibilities, of course. But anyway, we want to encourage you to be intentional. Jot down your victories when you have them. Just keep a running list, a quick little reminder of ways that God has enabled you and equipped you to do things that you didn't dream you'd be able to. And when you're struggling with moving forward in faith, have a look at that, because sometimes it's your fear of risk emotionally, spiritually, physically, fear of what other people might think of you, whatever. We want to be intentional not to let those fears own us. Our runaway thoughts can take us captive if we don't take them captive. We've got to be pretty intentional. This is our last broadcast from Northern California.
That's right.
And so the next time we do a broadcast, we anticipate our background will be a little bit different, and we're looking forward to that. Yep. We will plan to be here next Wednesday at 2 o'clock Pacific time, and we'll look forward to that. And so come to our website.
We have a free ebook for you at our website, renewlifementoring.com. And we are still currently in our Freedom to Feel
deep dive,
and we will be having our Consciously Created Living deep dive starting September 1st, I suppose.
Yes.
And so
if you like what we've been talking about this month, and we're going to continue all of August to talk about consciously created living, we will be doing a deep dive in a Facebook group, like we're doing for Free to Feel, a deep dive right now with some people in Facebook, in a Facebook group for that. If you want to do that and kind of workshop it out, like what will this look like? What does it look like to be consciously creating my life? We're going to be doing that in September. So in the meantime, Wednesdays at 2, same bat time, same bat channel. And we look forward.
2 o'clock Pacific time.
Yeah, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.
All right.
Have a great week.
Take care.
Bye.